Welcome to episode number 202 of the Marine Layer podcast. We welcome on Joe Doyle from Future Stars and the Overslot podcast. We talk about the Mariners' most recent international signing class they signed this past week. We'll talk some prospect trade values and discuss what we expect from some Mariners prospects in 2025. Ichiro was also inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame today, and we'll talk about it.
Here's your guys' reminder, if you're listening to these podcasts on the audio side, go rate and review everywhere, download the episodes. If you're downloading the episodes, guess what? You don't need service, you don't need Wi-Fi to listen. You can just listen whenever you want. So just another incentive, right? If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and please hit that subscribe button. It's the best way you can support the channel. And if you're on social media, we know most of you are, you can find us everywhere. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts, Blue Sky. We're posting content every day at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Gant. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game is 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network, recording on Tuesday evening, January 21st. We got back from T-Mobile Park a couple of hours ago where Ichiro had his Hall of Fame press conference. Lyle, are we surprised Jerry did not trade someone while we were sitting in that room?
Yeah, because he's made so many trades this winter, you have to just think anytime you shut off your phone or turn the other way, a trade's coming, right? I mean, there's just been so many moves all winter.
Well, that makes me think that it's almost more likely at this point because he hasn't gotten those trades out of his system yet.
So he would do it when everybody's busy with something else?
Yes, especially if it was a bad trade. It's like, oh, it's Ichiro's day. This is great. And Andres Munoz has been traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. Like,
Or people are sitting there listening to Ichiro talk, reminiscing on his awesome career. Presser gets done, you walk out, and they signed Yohan Moncada.
and then you hear Lyle with all the current and former, I guess, legacy Mariners media members all around him, former team executives. Hear Lyle go, "Fuck!"
You see, you joke, but I really might have done that.
Well, you could have walked into the Diamond Club, shut the door, and then screamed. It's like, what's that vibrating sound? Oh, that's just Lyle. Did he just break a table? Yeah, I think he did.
That's just Lyle. What's the old Kent Murphy voice? I'll paraphrase a little bit. Oh, that's just normal Lyle doing normal stuff. I mean, nothing newsworthy here.
Jerry did not make a trade, thankfully. No transactions while we were there. So still with a transaction. The big league transaction counters at 1 for those keeping track.
Yes, it does. All right, we're going to get into Ichiro here plenty. I just want to remind people before we do, we talked about it on Friday's show. We just want to keep getting the word out there to you guys. Our first live show, Marine Layer Pod live show, which we are fired up about, is coming up in just under a month now. It's February 20th at Moss Bay Hall in Kirkland. That'll be at 6 p.m. start time. So come hang out. Come check it out. We're going to get you details again on more of the nuts and bolts of what the event will hold as time continues to go on and we plan more of it out. But again, Thursday, February 20th, 6 p.m., Moss Bay Hall in Kirkland. Come hang out. It is going to be a blast.
So Ichiro was inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, or let me reword that, Baseball Hall of Fame. Earlier today, Lyle, he got all but one vote to get inducted. Let's just lay out the details first. He's going to go in with CC Sabathia and Billy Wagner. They're going to retire Ichiro's number now on August 9th. They're going to have a full weekend about it. His number, it's going to be his number retired. I don't think they're going to add anything with Randy to that number. It's going to be just his number 51 retired in the outfield, as they announced. Okay. Yeah, let's get this elephant out of the room.
Hey, no. Don't you want to do some positive before we just start ripping into the voters?
I thought you wanted to jump into it.
I just thought it's been a decently positive week for the Mariners community and fan base, which doesn't usually happen in recent off seasons, especially not this off season. I figured maybe we give people a reason to be positive and a reason to be, have some joy. And then as time goes on into this episode, we can get more into the one voter. I just thought we'd start with some positives. Usually we have to start with just shredding this team and the lack of moves it's making.
Fine. Can I start with an Ichiro story?
Yes. Go ahead.
I feel like this would be a good one to tell on here. This one is about him in his first spring training. This was tweeted by Jack Murphy about the Ichiro story in this spring training, about how Ichiro kept getting jammed and flaring balls the other way. Lou Piniella was in the dugout, and he was loudly voicing his opinion that Ichiro couldn't hit the fastball in the dugout, assuming he didn't understand English. Next at bat, Ichiro launches a home run over the right field fence, comes back to the dugout, and says in crystal clear English to Lou Piniella, "Can I go back to getting ready for the season now? What a legend. Congrats on the Hall of Fame."
There's some really awesome Ichiro stories out there, and if you have some time, I would highly, highly recommend you go read a story that came out on ESPN here on Tuesday. It was an awesome column. It was written by Jesse Rogers and Alden Gonzalez, who just tell all these different Ichiro stories from his time in the big leagues, and they get all these people to chime in on the story and share some of their favorite memories of Ichiro. It's great. There was one about Lou Piniella, who in a similar sense, because this story you just told was in spring training, right?
Mm-hmm. And then there's another, yeah.
The one I'm remembering is Lou Piniella was getting all worried about Ichiro early on. It's like, this guy just flares baseballs the other way. It's all these rinky-dink singles. Is this going to work? It's like, and apparently Ichiro heard him talking about this. It's like, this is going to be a problem. Oh, it's along the lines of this. This is going to be a problem if this goes on long term. Next at bat, Ichiro steps up to the plate. He rips a home run to right field, comes back into the dugout, says to Lou Piniella, "How was that?" And Lou Piniella just laughs. And he's like, "Well, I guess I learned my lesson." And the rest is history, I'd say. That's just one of many, many stories and what was an awesome article. Again, they talked about how Ichiro ate the same chicken wings at 5:05 every day. And
do you know who I thought of with that?
Who?
You.
Oh, with PB&Js?
Well, you eat pretty similar food every day, don't you?
I do eat very, very similar food every day.
Yeah, that's why. I'm like, when you're in routine, you sound a little bit like Ichiro, but not quite chicken wings at 5 a.m.
Yeah. Apparently, no, I think they meant 5:05 p.m. before games.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then apparently they said Ichiro also used to like to dress up and walk around like an Italian runway model. Again, these are all things that most people didn't get to see because he kept it behind closed doors for people that were his teammates and coaches. But again, highly recommend you go read the story. It was awesome.
Or when he was with the Marlins in 2017 and he picked up his phone, he's reading through his text messages, and he had a text from an unknown number that wanted to know a little bit more about his stretching routine. So he walked into the coach's office and was scrolling his like, this dude said Alex Rodriguez gave out Ichiro's number to this person and wants to learn more about his stretching routine. And the coaches were scrolling. It's like, oh, so who wants your stretching routine? And Ichiro reads it. It's like, hey, Ichiro, this is Tom Brady. I want to learn more about your stretching routine. And Ichiro picks his head up and looks at the coaches and says, who the fuck is Tom Brady?
You know, it's funny. Some of Ichiro's funniest quotes, I feel like he doesn't like to talk about. Well, he doesn't like to talk about a lot of things. But were you watching the ceremony on MLB Network today? Well, I know you were, but I guess I'm more asking the public. Were you guys watching this ceremony on MLB Network? Because Bob Costas did a callback to that interview with Ichiro 20 years ago about his quote regarding August in Kansas City is hotter than 2 rats in a fucking wool sock was what he said. And Bob Costas called it back today with the clip to Ichiro, and Ichiro didn't look like he was amused. It seemed like maybe he wished he hadn't said it.
Even though Ichiro in the interview was laughing his ass off.
I know.
When he said that quote, it was like, oh, guys, isn't this so funny?
Yeah, I think that might have been part of it. Part of it might have been again, he hadn't been in America that long and was still learning the culture. I was also talking to somebody about this today, too, regarding that quote and why today Ichiro may have wanted to walk it back and felt remorseful about it is I think it's different culturally in Japan where you kind of don't let that stuff air out and you kind of don't break face, so to speak.
It's all about respect.
Right.
And
so maybe
taking a dump on Kansas City is not respectful.
Sure. So maybe that's what he feels like. But anyway, like that's not to take away from the quote. Like everybody that hears the quote thinks it's hilarious. Like I thought it was great that they called that back. Maybe Ichiro, however, didn't. Now
that he's in the Hall of Fame, I really do recommend people go back and watch a video that friend of the podcast, Foolish Baseball, Bailey Freeman did a few years ago. He took a look at what would happen if Ichiro could hit for more power. And he made a case that Ichiro could have easily been a 500 home run hitter. Let me repeat myself. He made a case, going back and looking at some of Ichiro's Japan numbers and his U.S. numbers, that Ichiro could have been a 500 home run hitter if he wanted to. Mm-hmm. He is an incredible athlete. Just a remarkable hitter. Which is, I get the biggest laugh at when we had this Arise discussion, and there are some people who are like, oh, he's kind of like Tony Gwynn. Oh, the Mariners had Ichiro. It's so similar. It's like, no. Like, take a look at some of these things. I really recommend you guys go watch that baseball bits that Bailey did. Go look up Ichiro on his channel. You'll find it. I think it's the only Ichiro video he's done. It's a phenomenal video. And just shows how unique of a baseball player there will be. There's... in the Hall of Fame, there's a lot of unique profiles, but there is a little bit of crossover. Ichiro is one of those one-of-ones. There will never be another Ichiro. There's never going to be someone that comes to baseball at the age of 27 and still has over 3,000 hits. That's never going to happen again. Very unique scenario for Ichiro because he's already played pro for 6 years before that. But that's still never going to happen. Not a chance. If say another Japanese player came over from NPB and played from age 19 to age 25, played the full time in Japan, and then came over to Major League Baseball then and had 3,000 hits. That's a complete hypothetical. I don't think that would ever happen again. Like this is a one-of-one player all time.
Yeah. Shohei came over at 23, I believe, and I've said it before, I'll continue to say it. I think Shohei is the greatest player to ever live, but he's not getting to 3,000 hits. He may put together he is going to put together an unprecedented career in his own right, and he is going to go down as the greatest player to ever live, as I continue to say. But he's not going to be a 3,000 hit guy. That's just not his game. The pitching's gotten too good, etc. Yes, there will never be another 3,000 hit guy. I don't think anybody's ever breaking Ichiro's 262 hits in a single season. I don't think you're going to see anybody go for 200 hits for 10 straight years again either. Things like that have just changed and gone away from the game of baseball. And Ichiro, like you said, there's nobody cut from that cloth.
How remarkable is it now that there are now 4 members of the 99 or higher percent club in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame? 50% of it is made up of Yankees, which is expected because they're the most historic and greatest franchise in baseball. And the other 2 are Seattle Mariners. Does that feel weird?
Well, did either of those guys ever play in a World Series?
No.
No? Oh, sorry, I must have missed that. My bad.
It does show you the balance is the wrong word, but I do think it's ironic that you have baseball's best and worst franchise occupying the 99% club down the middle.
It's pretty wild. It's very, very wild. Okay, last story I want to tell before we take away what we heard from him in the presser and everything, which was, this is kind of on a personal note. I don't even know if you know this. It's not like something nothing I won't tried to hide or anything like that. In fact, it was awesome. I just don't know if I ever got around to telling you about it. So I'll tell you here along with everybody else. My brother and I got to do that thing on Kids Appreciation Day when we were much, much younger, where on the last day of the year, they have kids run out to each position and then the player runs out and they sign a ball. So I want to say I was 13 and my brother and I got to do it. My brother got was told the position you're going to run to is first base, so he got Mike Carp. I'm sure I'll remember that forever. And I got told, yeah, you're going to be in right field. I went, holy hell. I was like, so I'm going to meet Ichiro and get an autograph from Ichiro. And I did. I was in way over my head. It was the wildest thing ever back when I did it. I shook his hand because I think it was my dad that gave me the suggestion of, if you do that, you'll always remember that. So I did. And, you know, how everybody talks about his English has always been very good. He just prefers to speak in his fluent language of Japanese. Well, sorry, no, he's fluent in English. It's just his first language in Japanese. But when he talked to us for the minute that he did, he was speaking good English, and he was talking, and he was friendly, which was cool. Obviously, as somebody who grew up admiring the guy, I'll always remember that. So, last little story on a personal note.
They always had a great fan appreciation day at the end of the season. Always. Because they were never in the playoffs.
What? Games haven't been packed on game 162? No.
Oh, they have.
No. You're lying. They're always packed. Wow.
They just but think of it. If they made the playoffs, maybe you wouldn't have gotten that opportunity.
That's true. I guess I didn't think about that. I think I'd still take... Well, for that 1 year, maybe...
Glass half full, dog.
Yeah, it's glass half full. That's fair.
So what did we learn at this press conference?
All right, let's start with some of the easy stuff. Ichiro got to reminisce and talk about, while he's sitting in that room, he's sitting next to Alan, his interpreter, and he's sitting by Kevin Martinez, who started the interview and started the presser. He said, look, I don't think anybody on earth thought that 25 years ago when I got here, I guess technically 24 years ago, that I was going to be sitting here today, that I was ever going to be a Hall of Famer. But here he sits as one of the greatest players to ever play this game, which is crazy. Ichiro was revered in Japan. He was put on such a pedestal. And it's crazy to think it's crazy to think now that he came over thinking, am I going to be a nobody? Is this going to work? Can I succeed? As somebody who was such an icon in his own country. But clearly there was doubts from himself, from people around him, from a lot of people that, look, you may have a good career over there, Ichiro, and you may have some success, but are you going to be a Hall of Famer? Didn't seem like that was a consensus. And to sit here today and look back on that, it's like, wow, full circle.
If you think about it more, the impact of what Ichiro trailblazed from Japan and the uplift of, I think it was Shannon Dreyer describing it, like the uplift of the psyche of Japan. Or was it Salk today? It was. I think
Shannon was on. She was talking about it.
Yeah, just his performance in the big leagues uplifted Japan so much in a number of ways. And I think it comes around to think about this point. Does Shohei Ohtani play baseball if Ichiro's not a crazy success story? Like that, some world you could still say, yeah. You could say, TJ, of course. He's like this freak natural athlete. Of course he's going to try and play baseball. Players love playing baseball in Japan. Like, I get that. But is it as incentivizing if you know there's not a path to the ultimate goal? Like, players could still play in the NPB, but is there that confidence that you can go over and do it if Ichiro didn't do it 20 years before you did?
Probably not to the same level. And I'll tell you what, if Shohei had been the trailblazer, if he had been the first guy to ever go stateside and try to play in Major League Baseball, I doubt any team would have seriously said, yeah, we'll let you go two ways. Because not only would a player from Japan have never come stateside, especially a position player, to try and succeed before, but I don't think anybody would have taken the idea seriously of, yeah, this guy can come play two ways in the U.S. Teams would have said there's no way. But when people saw the success that Ichiro had when he came over, it set the standard. And people said, yes, guys from the NPB and guys from Japan can succeed here. Some of the best talent in the world is over there, and we know that now. So, look, is Shohei Ohtani still playing baseball one way or another? I'm sure he is. But is Shohei Ohtani at the same level that he's at right now had Ichiro not paved the way? I don't know if he is or not.
The best quote for us, I would say. I don't know if it was for everyone else, but I was kind of shocked that this was the result of this question. I forget who asked it, but Ichiro was asked, who are some people you heard from? Like, who maybe gave you the biggest smile when you saw it or something? I don't remember the exact words, but that's
he just was asked what players have reached out to you today after the announcement. Who have you heard from?
And instead of just listing off everybody, he said, "Man, I was really happy I heard from this person because, I've never gotten a chance in the last few months I never got to say goodbye to him when he left this organization." He said Scott Service. I was so happy I got a message from Scott Service today. And then Ichiro made sure to put in there, by the way, which I fully believe was intentional. I never got to say goodbye to him when he left this organization. And I was like, wow. I mean, I know they probably worked together. Ichiro was on the field all the time when Scott was managing. And Scott managed Ichiro and then worked with him once Ichiro moved into a front office role. But I'm going to be honest, I didn't think that was the answer that was going to come out of Ichiro's mouth. When I think of notable people to reach out to Jerry Dipoto, no offense to Scott, he's not on top of the list.
All right, we've been all overjoyed and sentimental for enough time. Now let's go back to normal Marine Layer Pod tinfoil hat time, because I'm putting it on here. It's tinfoil hat time. Now, let me preface this by saying this is all speculation being put out there by the two of us. However, it's well known people don't know a whole lot about Ichiro, how he thinks, what his hobbies are, etc. Just about his life. He's a closed off guy, and with that, people don't know what his internal thoughts are on the organization these days at all. But when I heard that quote, and he made it very, very clear how happy he was to hear from Scott Service and spend some time talking about Scott Service, well knowing how things ended here with the total, scapegoating that went on to get him out of this organization and then doing no hiring process to bring in a new manager and then giving him the full-time job, Ichiro might like Dan Wilson a lot, but if he likes Scott Service, that to me feels like there is a chance that Ichiro was sitting there and said, yeah, I'd like to get my thoughts out there about this without crossing a line. And that to me, if you try to pick up the tea leaves, may have been what was going on. I'm going to be honest, because especially that he, like you said, Tej, he put in the point of, I didn't really get to say bye.
He didn't have to say that. He could have just said, I heard from Scott Service. It was great.
Mm-hmm. He could have said, I heard from Scott Service. I heard from Dan, who's here today. I heard from Olrud, who was here today, because Dan Wilson and John Olrud were at the press conference for any of those interested. But he could have said, heard from Junior, heard from Buhner, heard from whoever. He could have listed off a bunch of people. Spent a lot of time talking about Scott Service and how he really wished he could have gotten a chance to have some closure with Scott Service.
I don't know if this is something Ichiro would have picked up on, but sitting up there, because there were a lot of people in that presser. It was hot in that room. There was easily 100 people in there, right? I would say easily.
Yep. Oh, there was a ton. And there was a ton of Japanese media there, too, which you would fully expect with a day like today.
Neither of those decision makers, Lyle, were in the presser that we saw.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Again.
Neither of them were there. Tinfoil hat is fully on the head right now.
Again, people, you didn't really think we were going to go some whole episode just sitting here being sentimental and emotional. No. We're back to your standard programming now. So, who was not in the presser, Tej? The two, I would say, ringleaders of people that I would say the Mariners work very hard to keep out of the limelight these days. Jerry Dipoto, John Stanton, were not there. They were not present at the meeting. We were there. We were sitting through it. The two of them were not there. And then you have Ichiro sitting there talking for a long while about Scott Service.
Do we think they were in the hall outside? Because the entire Mariners front office did like an Ichiro chant. They all lined up and down the hall. If you check the Mariners socials, like employees up and down the hall, they could have been there. Like there's a chance they could have been there and not in the room because they didn't need to ask Ichiro any questions. So here, let's lay out our theories on this. I love this. Lyle and I are two opposite sides of what's happening here. I think it's a total non-story. I think Jerry was probably working. He might have been on the phone trying to get a trade through, and we're going to get a passing notification here in about an hour, and you're going to have to stay up even later tonight so we can record our emergency episode when they acquire...
Don't say Yohan Moncada.
Well, it's going to be a trade. So we'll say Alec Bohm.
Great. Actually, that'd be great.
Yeah, it would be great. Worth staying up for. Jerry could have been working. Stanton, I'm not sure why Stanton wasn't there. Like, he's the chairman of the team. I do feel like that is something you go there for, but I will say it's not like nobody was up there. Kevin Martinez is now second in line in the organization outside of the ownership group, and he was up there on the podium. And it is, at this point of Ichiro's career, not a baseball thing. It is a business thing for the Seattle Mariners. That's why the president of business operations, Kevin Martinez, is sitting up there on the podium.
I wish you and I had strong disagreements to take to the pod more often, because it makes for great content. It makes for great podcasting. I really wish, not that we don't disagree on anything, but I wish we had strong opinions on polar opposite sides more often, because, man, it makes for good content. I will say, for anybody listening, drop us a comment on the YouTube comments. Let us know whose side you're on this. I genuinely want to know. You can send us a DM too, but we encourage you to drop a comment on YouTube. So, why do I think those two weren't there? Again, here we go again. Tinfoil hat time. I just put it right back on. Why do Stanton and Jerry stay out of the public nowadays? Why do they not do many public media sessions? Well, because the two seem to put their foot in their mouths a lot. The offseason has gone nothing short of terrible so far in terms of what the on-field big league product's going to look like so far. And this also would have been the first time all offseason that not only any Seattle media would be in the vicinity, but a huge group of Seattle media. Now, I'm not saying they were going to go up there and answer questions, because they weren't. It wasn't their time. It wasn't their show. This was for Ichiro. My take is the Mariners didn't want them anywhere near media people in general to avoid any potential disaster if anybody would have tried to ask him something. See, TJ's already shaking his head and saying no. I don't think this is the craziest thing in the world, that they just want him nowhere near anybody.
It's a room full of adults watching Ichiro have his moment. What kind of moment would it be if you're a beat writer and instead of like enjoying the moment with Ichiro, you instead like decide it's time to drill Jerry DiPoto on his offseason? Like, seriously. Again, everyone in the room is an adult. Every single person. Jerry's an adult. John's an adult. They know how to handle themselves in a public setting surrounded by their peers. Okay. Watching a franchise icon get inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. They can stand there for a 20-minute press conference without having to worry about sticking their foot in their mouth. I think they can manage that. How many companies has John Stanton founded?
Okay.
How many?
I don't know. A lot.
Okay, there we go. Those require a lot of conversations, right? Where you don't stick your foot in your mouth. Because you sticking your foot in your mouth, you don't create the company. The company fails.
Again,
right?
I'm not saying anybody would have interrupted the presser to ask them things. That's not what would have gone on. But there were people talking in the hallways after. When things ended, who's to say somebody didn't try to... Again, they've been unavailable.
Everyone's adults. They're not going to do that.
Okay, it's not about being an adult. I'm not saying somebody would have drilled them, but like tried to ask anything about what in the hell has gone on this offseason. Again...
Well, Jerry and John then just wouldn't have answered the question. We were standing right next to the elevators. They would have gotten the elevator, and they would have went back up to their office.
Fine. Then I say, why were they not there? So far, because we were talking about this pre-recording too, TJ doesn't have an answer for this. So this is the answer I'm going with, is they did not want to be anywhere near a vicinity.
I don't
where
have
they
an answer for John.
Questions.
Jerry was probably working.
Okay, so how...
Jerry has less of a reason to be there. Again, he's the president of baseball operations. There's no baseball operations going on at that press conference.
Okay, fine. So how about this? Well, Jerry doesn't do much media stuff these days. He did do some sort of end-of-season press conference. It was, it had some moving parts to it where I don't think everybody knew it was going on because it was very sudden when it happened. But he has talked, and he was around at the winter meetings, even if he didn't do a public session. Like, he was there. The guy you're scratching your head more about not being there, the owner of the team, the CEO of the team, who really doesn't go anywhere in the public these days. Why is he not there? My take, especially on him, the Jerry thing, I can I could be swayed on. Could. The Stanton thing? No, I'm sticking by that. That's why he was not there.
What if Stanton had a family emergency?
Oh, well, I mean, then yes, yeah.
Like, we don't know.
No.
Hence I think John can handle himself standing in a room watching Ichiro answer questions.
Again,
and I think everyone else in the room could handle standing there next to John Stanton without being like, oh, is the payroll going up? Is the payroll going up, John? Is the payroll going up?
Okay,
how about $30 million?
Now you're blowing this out of proportion, because that's not what I'm saying.
I'm not.
I don't think that's what anybody would do. But, like, again, to your point about people being adults, people could try and ask a question like an adult. That's what I'm getting at. They didn't want him doing that.
No.
That's my guess. Again, this is all speculation, but...
This is not a scenario where Jerry and John are running away from media.
That's what I say. Okay, so come up with an answer to this question, which I think I asked you pre-recording too. Stanton was at the 54% conference, but he wasn't at this one.
Different scenarios. Again, we don't know what's going on in John Stanton's life.
I know.
But I can't give you an answer why he wasn't there, but I don't think it's because they're shielding him from the media.
Well,
it's not his presser.
But if you're an
People
owner
are there
of a
to write stories about Ichiro. They're not there to investigate the budget.
Okay, again, I'm not saying you would get peppered, but they're just trying to avoid any question at all. And again, like, even if it's not your press conference, which again, yes, it's not, but wouldn't you want to be there for an owner of a team for one of your franchise cornerstones going into the Hall of Fame?
I don't have a good answer why he's not there. But I feel like as the chairman of the team, you can handle when someone asks you a question about the offseason, you can say no comment or take it up with PR and then walk into the elevator. I'm sure he's done that 1,000 times.
Maybe. But it's more fun.
Why would this time be, deal breaker? Can't show my face.
Well, I mean, this offseason and its discourse has been about as bad as it's ever gotten. That being said, could he have taken that route? Yes. And I got to be honest, it's way more fun to go with this story. You're being boring. My story is more fun. There's more to talk about.
Well, I'm trying to be logical for an illogical franchise.
And I'm trying to cook up why the owner of a team wouldn't be there to see his franchise cornerstone go into the Hall of Fame and, have his moment in the sun.
There might have been some other owners in there, but we just don't know what they look like.
I think we know what some of them look like.
The top ones, yes.
At least.
Do you know the bottom 10?
Maybe not, but there's at least a handful, if not more, that we'd say, oh, it's that guy.
Mm-hmm. So were they there?
Not anybody that we recognized.
Well. Also, shout out to the Mariners are redoing their sod on the field.
Yeah.
Great metaphor for the offseason. We walk out there to shoot our social clip, and I'm looking around. I'm like, man, they're really tearing up this field. It looks kind of rough right now. I'm thinking like, oh, wow, that's ironic.
Yeah, yes, it was. Oh, you know what? Last thing on this whole combo, because when you talk about ownership, Stanton seems to always be the one that's brought up because he's the face. Yeah, let me bring this up. Where was Chris Larson? Guy's a ghost all the time. Your franchise cornerstone's going into the Hall of Fame. Don't you want to see him have his moment? Oh, no? You're not going to show up? Well, that's interesting. He's never around.
Has Chris Larson showed up to a presser?
No, never.
That would probably be a Divish question. He'd know if he did. My money's on no.
Again, that would be the type of thing where he would to see a franchise cornerstone go into the Hall of Fame. But,
sure. Okay.
Well, you say sure, but then if you're not even, if you don't have any, okay, let me say it like this. If you're not interested in showing up for Ichiro, if you were around and available, then what are we doing?
Okay, let's think about it from an owner's perspective. You are so high up in the organization that you don't need to sit in a press conference to sit there and congratulate Ichiro and talk to him. Well, just remember that.
Sends a nice
John Stanton and Chris Larson, if they wanted to, could talk with Ichiro one-on-one. Congratulations. Oh, this is great. Da, 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 da. without having to sit in that stuffy room for 30 minutes listening to questions.
Well, I'm just saying, sends a nice message.
Oh, it would. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah. We miss anything else from Ichiro?
Favorite Ichiro moment?
Yeah, okay, let's end with this, and then we'll get to Joe. For me, it's the 258th hit. I was so young. It was the first full season I really remember, that being 2004, which is an unfortunate first season to really have a lasting memory of, because that's when all the losing started in this franchise. In my lifetime, in your lifetime, in our generation's lifetime was 04. But the shining moment of that season was Ichiro surpassing George Sisler as the game's all-time single-season hit leader. And I remember, I was watching every game back then. I was dialed in on Ichiro and him chasing this hit record. And I remember that night when he needed the 2 hits, I remember the big candy hop over third base that he had to get 257 to tie it. And then I remember the ground ball back up the middle to break it. And I remember 6 or 7-year-old me was going nuts. I was fired up. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was like, we have somebody that is just the best in baseball at this. And not a lot of teams have that. No other team had an Ichiro, especially in that point in time. So that was my favorite moment. It was my first real, wow, we don't just have a really good player on this team. We have an icon on this team, a legend on this team. And yeah, I loved all of that.
I don't have memory of that season, but I do have memory of the 2009 season where Ichiro hit a walk-off homer over Mariano Rivera. That was pretty cool. Dave Sims had the legendary call. A couple of Hall of Famers going head-to-head. There's a drive deep to right field. Ichiro has beaten Mariano Rivera. The walk-off 2-run home run. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Got all those words.
I think he also added in there, going back swisher, Ichiro as the ball landed. He's like beating Mariano Rivera. Yeah.
Pretty legendary swing, and I think that encapsulated what Ichiro was. Going back to my point earlier when I suggested you watch Foolish Baseball's video on Ichiro could have done that a lot.
Yeah.
He 100% in that moment steps up to the plate and knows, like, yeah, I'm the winning run. Why don't I just tee off on this one? And boom. It was awesome. What a great moment. For, again, he played on such just a mediocre to bad stretch of Mariners baseball and was so unbelievable that those moments right there should have happened way more often, but didn't. So it was a treat when it did get to happen, and Ichiro got his shining moment against Mariano Rivera. It would have been nice if he got to do it in the playoffs, but we can't all get what we want. So shout out Ichiro for that awesome moment.
Last thing, because we haven't gotten to it yet. The one person that decided not to vote for Ichiro, fuck off. You're not allowed to vote ever again.
Could you imagine working your way up through the Baseball Writers Association, earning the right to vote for the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, looking at Ichiro's resume with his over 3,000 hits, his MVP award, his 10 gold gloves, and deciding that's not a Hall of Famer?
I would call that sad.
I don't know how else to describe it.
Baseball voting for the Hall of Fame is so stupid. How do you not have to publicly put out your ballots? That, like, I guarantee you if ballots were public, this guy's not leaving Ichiro off his ballot. Whoever this is thinks it's hilarious, whatever discourse is going on right now about the fact that Ichiro missed one vote, and he made it about himself for a career that wasn't his, and somebody who worked his ass off because he's some pretentious writer who wanted to make a scene. The whole thing is so stupid. I cannot wait till all these boomers get out of voting.
I legitimately think this person should lose their vote. The one person who didn't vote for Ichiro, the one person who didn't vote for Derek Jeter, the 3 people who didn't vote for Griffey, you guys should all lose your votes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm asking. You have 10 votes. You look at the players. You are asked a simple question. Is this player a Hall of Famer? Yes or no? Not, maybe in 3 years he's a Hall of Famer. Why? He doesn't play. No, he's a Hall of Famer right now. You have 10 votes. There are never more than 10 Hall of Famers on any ballot. There's never more than 3 on any ballot. So vote. Please. It's ridiculous.
And sad. It really is sad. God, these stupid voters. Well, maybe the one person that didn't vote for Jeter thought he was such an atrocious defender, which he is and was, that he didn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Did you see the fake Mets rider taking a victory lap, claiming that he Mark Gooden, the account?
That guy's funny. Yeah, that he was like, I was the one who didn't vote for Ichiro, and I saw some people
I saw some people falling for it. It's like, embarrassing. And he put in his bio in the last line as, did not vote for Ichiro, and I thought it was the funniest thing.
God, that was great. All right. Well, congratulations, Ichiro. You had an unprecedented, historic, one-of-one career, and you deserve all the recognition that's coming your way. We will be fans of yours forever. Before we get to Joe, let's take a quick pause. We're going to talk to you guys about our friends over at Pagacci's Pub 85. You got NFL Championship weekend this weekend. You also got college basketball. You got hockey. You got a bunch of sports. You want to go watch games with your friends? Head over there because there's 20 TVs in that place. So watch all the games that you might desire. You can have some awesome food. You can go play some darts. You can go play some pool. And if you want happy hour drinks, that's your spot because drinks are $3 and $4 at happy hour, and happy hours last from 2 to 6 p.m. on Monday through Friday. Again, those are $3 and $4 drinks during happy hours. So go have yourself a fun time over with your friends. That's over at Pagacci's Pub 85 in Kirkland.
We wanted to have Joe on because of the international signing class that was signed last week, highlighted by Jorge Batista. That is, by the way, how you pronounce his name. I think we mispronounced it for the first few times we talked about him, but it is your hair. So we spend a little bit of time on him. There's some interesting points too, Lyle, with Joe that I want people to pay attention to at the beginning of the conversation, where we talk about the lack of movement with prospects this offseason. Puts it in some really good context. I learned a lot, especially when it comes to moving players off the Mariners roster and what it would take. Hint, 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 hint.
No doubt. Joe's great. He's so tuned in, so knowledgeable about, well, a ton of baseball stuff, but certainly prospects, which is what we spend time talking with him about. Joe's become a friend of ours. We've loved getting to pick his brain as much as we have, and we think you guys are going to enjoy this one because, again, Jorge Batista is a legit prospect. His nickname's The Beast, and there's not that much out on him yet. So if you want a full breakdown on this guy, listen to this interview with Joe, and I think you're going to come away pretty excited about who this guy could be.
We won't keep you guys any longer. Let's get you to the interview with Joe Doyle.
All right, we've got our friend Joe Doyle on with us. He's a writer for Future Stars. He's also the host of the Overslot podcast. Go check that out when you get the chance. Joe, good to have you hop on. As always, your offseason can be described as how?
What offseason?
Seems about right.
No, I mean, yeah, I stay busy writing about prospects and stuff, but from a local standpoint, paying attention to Mariners baseball and reading about Mariners baseball, yeah, no, I think my point stands. What offseason?
Well, given how quiet the offseason has been, I'd imagine there is some relaxation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't find myself writing about Mariners prospects being traded or prospects being traded into the organization, which is, I think, a weird middle ground for Mariners content creators or Mariners writers, because the history of the organization has always been one of rebuilding and bringing prospects in, or, especially of late, the Jerry Dipoto era has been adding talent and trading prospects away. So in that regard, yeah, I haven't had much to write about, but just from previewing the 2025 season, just very, very little to write about, and frustratingly so, because obviously the 2024 product wasn't good enough, and a lot of the key pieces with this 2025 product are a year older now. So that has to be something of a concern.
Why are no prospects getting moved?
Yeah, I mean, I think the addition of that extra wild card team a couple of years ago is huge. I think there's just so many teams that think, okay, there's one more playoff spot. What if we get hot? You think back, like even last year, the Pirates, a lot of people didn't think the Pirates were going to be competitors last year, and they got hot, and they were in it for a lot of the season. And a lot of times you're a prospect or two away from competing. I mean, look at Jared Jones and Paul Skeens and some of the things that they were able to do in Pittsburgh. So I don't think it's a matter of teams not valuing prospects. I still think they're the market inefficiency. They're the way to get better and sustain success over time. But I just think from a realistic standpoint, moving big league talent for what-if talent at this stage in the winter is just going to get harder and harder as every year goes by.
Do you feel like as time goes on in an offseason that people will open the door more to trades, or do you just mean in general, unless you're one of those bottom feeder teams, the White Sox, the Marlins, etc., people are just going to stand pat and say, no, we're going to try to add to the big league roster?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. What if you are the let's throw out a team, the Cincinnati Reds? See, and maybe that's the issue, is that I'm sitting here and I'm like, what teams are going to be bad? Like what teams are going to be truly bad? Even the Oakland Athletics are like, well, what if Brent Rooker and Jacob Wilson and Luis Severino, like what if they get hot and they've got a couple of bullpen pieces that make the end of games interesting? Like I think that mental exercise that I just went to kind of speaks volumes. It's like I can't really point to like a whole bucket of teams that are for sure going to be bad in 2025. And because those teams don't exist and they're not willing to wave the white flag, teams aren't willing to move their starting third baseman or their starting second baseman for prospects unless they have something like a Matt Shaw waiting in the wings. And we saw that Chicago, the Cubs, moved a lot of infielders pretty quickly this offseason, and so they kind of came off the board. But I think it's the latter, Lyle. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of teams that are willing to move contributors for the future.
Mm-hmm. Is the prospect value getting low enough where the Mariners can't even just attach a prospect to Mitch Haniger to get rid of that salary? Because this is something Lyle and I have talked about a lot over the offseason. It just seems logical to shed that $15.5 million he has, and it's like, you're going to have to sacrifice a prospect because no one's going to just take it on for free, obviously. If you want someone to take all that salary, you attach someone you value that the other team hopefully would value and just absorb Mitch Haniger's salary. Does a team look at a prospect in that point and say, even that's not worth it for us?
Yeah, so I think that's a misconception that a lot of fans have with this team, with just how much $15 million is, especially in 1 year. Look at what the Braves did to take on Marco Gonzalez. It took Jared Kelenic. Jared Kelenic was not a nothing. I mean, a lot of the league still believed he was going to be a 2.5 win player with 4 years of control left. And while that hasn't been the case, the ability to find $15 million in value from a prospect to get rid of a Mitch Haniger and to find a suitor that's willing to take on $15 million at this stage in the winter, I think is tough. I think if you're looking at like a $15 million prospect, the list is short. It's not Felnine Celestin. It's not Lázaro Montes. It's Colt Emerson. It's Cole Young. It's guys that project to be 2.5 win players for 1 year. It's $15 million of value. I mean, look at it from this point of view. If you move Cole Young and he is a 2-win player or a 1.5 win player, I think you guys would agree Cole Young's not going to be a 3.5, 4.5 win player.
No.
You are essentially moving for the control years 9 WAR, the chance to potentially get 9 WAR, which equates to, I'm doing the math in my head, $70 million. But that's on the upshoot. There's a chance that Cole Young might not work out. So I do think that it would require a pretty sizable prospect. Like, I don't think Harry Ford would get you $15 million off the books, personally.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they could probably knock the price down and only clear 7. I mean, 7 would make a huge impact on what they currently have. It doesn't need to be all 15.5. I think of a team like the Marlins, who I believe are on that list with the A's of a team needing to spend money, otherwise they're going to get a grievance filed against them. That feels like an advantage, a situation you take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a better way of attacking it. If you were trying to get, $8 million off the books. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if that's a Michael Arroyo. I don't know if that's a Johnny Farmelo, but I would just say that the prospect capital is going to be higher than I think people expect just for 1 year and $15 million.
That's interesting. Like, I guess I figured it would be somebody lower on the prospect rankings and somebody lower on the list than that. But man, just thinking about this out loud, you try to get rid of 1 year of Mitch Haniger and you have to give up Farmelo to do it. Those would be some pretty bad optics.
Here's the thing, Lyle. If you are trading a prospect to get rid of money, the team that's receiving that prospect has to know that it's a big leaguer. Because if that person never makes it, you just ate all that money for no value. You didn't add any value because they didn't make the big leagues. And so I look at a guy like Michael Arroyo, for example, who isn't a good defender, isn't a great runner, doesn't have a dynamic throwing arm. Like it's hit or bust. There's a reasonable chance that Michael Arroyo is in the league for 5, 6, 7 years and puts up 3 WAR for his entire career in a part-time role. And if you're a 3 WAR guy, is it worth acquiring 6 control years of a 3 career WAR guy and eating $9-10 million bucks? I think you can make the case that you need more. You need a bigger upshoot. So,
and that's why Garver, it seems like, would be the more likely one if they were going to try and shed one of those two, since he actually could provide value at the big league level this year. He would be more likely than Haniger would be.
Yeah, and I think you would bet more on a Mitch Garver bounce back than you would a Mitch Haniger bounce back, just because you can fake it as a backup platoon catcher. And also, Mitch Garver's career last year was such an outlier for Mitch Garver that I think if you get him in the right spot, there would be more takers for sure.
So Joe breaks down prospects as well as anybody, which is why we love to have him on as much as we do. And there's obviously news out of the baseball world, but the Mariners world for sure this week, as the new international signing classes put pen to paper over the last few days. For the Mariners, they've got an exciting class highlighted by Jorge Batista, who is obviously the blue chip marquee name in this class. He was number 6 per MLB Pipeline on their personal rankings of where he fits within this class. And there's not that much information out there on him yet. And you've been on him for a long time, and you've been watching film on him for a long time for what's out there and talking about him, etc. So, for those who don't know yet, because I'm guessing it's a very small number of people that have a true breakdown on who this guy is, I'll just start with this. From your perspective, as a little bit of an overview, who is Jorge Batista as a player?
Yeah, I think exciting would be the best word for it. He's probably up there with Noelvi Marte in terms of the best pure athletes at the time of signing that Seattle has acquired in the last handful of years. Felny Celestin was always kind of in that same bucket, but Felny had to grow. Like Felny Celestin was like, the broad shoulders, the long limbs, the super projectable. Like your hair is here. 6'1", 185 pounds. He's ranked 6 at MLB Pipeline. He's ranked upwards of 9 to 15 other places. I polled 9 scouting directors. I have a relationship with 9 scouting directors. A lot of them have him in the 3 to 5 range, to be honest. So I would say this, what I was told was Jorge Batista has as good a chance as anybody in this class to be a 5-tool player, which is hard to come by. It's plus arm strength, it's center field profile, it's plus run times, it's plus bat speed. Now, that's not to say all of this is going to come to fruition. Once fully matured, he could slow down. Things can change, but he can run, he can throw, he's got bat speed and power. And yeah, he can go get it in center field. I think the biggest question for Jorge Batista over the last 18 months, at least as long as I've been following him, has been, is he going to hit? And that's the question with a lot of these international free agents. They're teenagers. On a regular day basis, they see 83 to 86 mile-an-hour fastballs. They don't see good breaking balls yet. And Jorge Batista has always had a really noisy swing, very handsy, a lot of moving parts. And so, evaluators question whether or not all of those moving parts will allow him to hit better stuff. But I'll tell you, having watched his film over the last 18 months, it has calmed way down. I mean, he is really quieting his swing down at the plate. So I'm bullish, and I think he's the type of guy that if it clicks right away in the Dominican Summer League this year, I would be very, very excited because it means his skills are translating to professional ball, and that's always a good sign.
I want to tap into your expertise for this. How does someone earn the nickname The Beast?
I don't know. I know the story behind it. His teammates in Venezuela donned him The Beast when he was 12. And he's been The Beast since he was 12 or 13 years old. I mean, The Beast, it's hard to find many nicknames that rival the Beast. If it comes together for this guy and he ends up being a 25 stolen base, 25 homer center fielder at the big leagues, I could get behind the nickname the Beast, but those are big shoes to fill for sure.
And then in terms of prospect value, how does he compare to the other top international signings of the past few years? You can go back to Julio, you mentioned Noelvi, Felnin, etc., all of these guys.
I mean, I would still comfortably put Felnin at the top of the list at the time of signing. And I think the signing bonus speaks for itself. I mean, Felnin was a $4 million player. I think your hair is 2.1, 2.2, maybe 2.3. Now, there is a small difference in that international scouts are generally a little bit more comfortable signing prospects from the Dominican Republic because they see better competition coming up the ladder. But Venezuela is no chump change either. I would say he's probably along the same lines as I would say he's probably in the same bucket as Noelvi Marte. I would put Felnin at the top. I would put your hair and Noelvi in that second bucket. And then probably Doyle Joseph would be 4. And I think you would have to put Laz Montes, at least for me, at 5 or 6. I'm forgetting someone too, but those would be the names that immediately come to mind. And I'd rank them like that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Laz, because here was one of the questions I had for you. Just off what some outlets have so far, again, from the very little information we so far have on this guy, the power grades that Batista has seem to match up to Laz, except that Batista's supposed to be the way better athlete. Is the power projection that serious?
Well, here's the thing. Laz is going to get to it effortlessly. He just swings the bat and has 70 grade raw power because of his size and his strength. Your hair is 6'1", 185 pounds. So while he can generate plus bat speed, I wouldn't personally stick 65 grade. I don't put a 65 power grade on anybody. I always go either 6 or 7, but I wouldn't attach something that high to a 17-year-old at this stage. We'll see where it ends up. I mean, throwing a 65 power grade on a kid that's 6'1" at the age of 17 is suggesting that he's going to hit 32 to 35 homers as a pro playing center field, which I think is rich for that age for a player of that size. So he's certainly not the natural power hitter that Laz is, but even if he's 1 degree of separation away from Laz, he projects to be a considerably better hitter than Lazaro Montes if it comes together the way scouts want it to. So I think for a guy his size and for how twitchy he is, if you get 24 to 28 homers out of him in any given year, you're pumped.
Yeah. And then the other side of that, before TJ gets his next question is whether or not he has Laz's power. It's very clear that he has power, and you just outlined that there. But do you believe, again, I know you said things can change over time, but sounds like you feel like he has a real shot to actually play center field?
Depends. That's always the toughest question to ask. He's 6'1", 185 as a 17-year-old. I mean, Lyle, you're still in great shape. TJ, you're still in great shape. Like, I don't know what you guys look like at 17, but people get a lot bigger, especially as they train. I mean, listen, like Felnin Celestin looks huge right now. I mean, he looks very, very bulked up. And that's not to say he's not going to play shortstop, but the point is, players age differently. Their bodies change. And so if he ends up being 6'1", 205, he might slow down a little bit and he might profile better into right field. But, so it's almost impossible to say that right now. He has gotten faster. He has gotten more athletic from the time he was 15 to now. It's hard to know what he's going to look like at 22.
Why does a prospect like Jorge Batista sign, despite being rated higher, sign for a smaller signing bonus than the next guy on the list that we want to ask you about, Kendry Martinez?
A couple of things. I mentioned the Dominican Republic thing. There's more scouts in the Dominican Republic internationally than there is anywhere else. The level of competition in the Dominican Republic is higher than anywhere else, for the most part, at least at the amateur level. So the players in the Dominican generally get bid up earlier than players in Venezuela or Colombia or some of these other Latin American countries. The other part of it is these deals are consummated super early. They're consummated very, very early. I think one thing that people don't realize is Jorge Batista was supposed to be a Chicago White Sox. He had a handshake agreement with the White Sox at the end of 2023. It fell through for some reason. Seattle swooped in. I think they offered him like $300,000 more than the White Sox had at that time. And that handshake agreement between organization and trainers and the families is extremely important for partnering in the years to come. If you renege a handshake agreement late in the status, late in the cycle, and the team doesn't have the money to make up those lost wages, it can crush the relationship between team and agent for a long time. So I think if you asked most teams, I think they would say Jorge Batista was more of a $3 million player this year, a $3.1 million player, than he was a $2.2 or $2.3 million player. So, it's just one of those things where trainers don't want to ruin a relationship with a team that's, it's one of those, like, don't bite the hand that feeds. This team is going to offer us $2.2 million. Let's not ruin the potential to sign other players with this organization seeking a bigger payday.
Last one I've got for you on the Beast, which is if he hits well in the DSL, like you talked about, could happen this year, what is a reasonable timeline we could see him in affiliated ball in Modesto? Because you would assume after the DSL he would spend some time in Arizona. Could it be sometime in late 2026?
Yeah, the Mariners haven't rushed anybody. I mean, the year one has always been like the entire year is spent in the DSL, and a lot of that has to do with education, language, schooling. They want assimilation to the United States and to Major League Baseball, and so I wouldn't expect Jorge to spend even a day in the Arizona Complex League or Modesto in 2025. I would expect, depending on how things go, that he starts in the Arizona Complex League in 26. And it's not a foregone conclusion that he jumps right to Modesto if he proves just like totally overmatched, like he's totally overmatching the opposition. He could be in Modesto as early as middle of May or I guess early June in 2026. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's discuss Kendry Martinez, the second highest rated guy in this international class. I've seen his tools aren't quite as loud. So what does he bring to the table in this?
I think he's a little bit more on the polished side. This is a perfect example. So Kendry Martinez gets 1.7? I don't have my notes in front of me, but it's like 1.7. And why? Because he's a Dominican shortstop. It's exactly like Jorge Batista is much more than a $400,000 excess value than Kendry Martinez. I think when you talk about Kendry Martinez, you're talking about a guy that you really hope is an above-average hit tool guy, a guy that can hit 270, a guy that can hit 275 at the big leagues, because not going to be a runner, not going to be a terribly impactful power type of a guy, and he's going to have a smattering of average tools. So I think when you talk about Kendry, there's a chance that he is a starting shortstop or second baseman at the big league level. I think most people think he's a second baseman or a third baseman. And given the tools, he probably projects to be another one of those, at peak, 1.5 WAR type of a guy. He's just not the most dynamic player in the world, but he is a better pure now hitter than Jorge Batista is.
So he's not even in the Michael Arroyo bucket.
Well, I mean, the difference there is Michael Arroyo is 5'9". I don't want to say Michael Arroyo has a bad body, but for all intents and purposes, from a prospect perspective, it's a bad body. Kendry is left-handed. He's got 3 or 4 inches on Michael Arroyo. You can look at Kendry Martinez and squint and say, oh, this could become something a little bit more athletic, whereas everyone knew when Michael Arroyo was an amateur that the body was going to go in a certain direction and he was going to have to hit.
If we want to move on to some of the other prospects in the Mariners system as we start to ramp up toward the start of 2025, we've definitely got a few in the bucket for you, so let me start here. Which prospect, it could be a blue chip guy or somebody that's flying under the radar, from your perspective, could take a big jump this year?
I tell you, the guy that I'm paying attention to, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong on Laz Montes. Back in 2022, I said anybody that's coming up, posting a 33% strikeout rate in the DSL. How is this going to translate to full season ball? I don't see it. 2023 was an absolute breakout star year for Laz. He's going to be tested this year with the best pitching he's ever seen. And for me, the comp that I've always put on Laz is, now I'm forgetting the guy's name, the Carlos Peguero, except slower, to be totally honest with you, which is a scary player. But that's always the comp that I had is Carlos Peguero. Like, this guy is going to hit 210, but this guy might hit 30 home runs. And the difference that Peguero had was he could run and he could throw. Laz can't run, Laz can't throw, Laz can't field. So he's going to have to bang. He's going to have to bang. And I think the farther he can get away from the narrative that, he's going to be a 37, 38% strikeout guy, the better. I am hoping from a Mariners prospect viewer perspective that we get a surprise from Laz this year, and he posts a 24% strikeout rate and takes Arkansas by storm and makes Dickey Stevens look small. And because I think at that point, once he starts doing it in Double-A against those pitchers, it's time to believe. Like, it's time to buy in. But if he comes up and does another 32, 33, 34% strikeout rate at high A, and I know he's young, I know he's 20, 21 years old, you genuinely have to question, like, what's the ceiling for a guy that is going to hit 210 with all these strikeouts and is definitely already a DH? He's just a scary prospect to me, and I really hope he takes another mammoth step because he'd be a really, really fun player to believe in.
How do you weigh the start of his time in high A last year where he came up and he was about as bad as you could possibly get, and then versus the end of it where he totally turned it around and he looked a lot more like he did Modesto?
That's kind of what bleeds into that answer for me is he was actually pretty damn good at the end of the season. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say he was rocking like a 24% strikeout rate the last 6 weeks. Like, it was better. Frankly, it was good. And I think if he can take that version of Laz Montes, and I would start him at high A again, but if you get him to Arkansas in June and he shows that he can hit, man, like, that is the middle of the lineup force that this team desperately could use in, frankly, 2027, but would sure be a nice luxury to look forward to on the horizon.
Is there a benchmark you feel like he needs to hit in high A before you promote him? Are we looking at strikeout rate? Or are we just looking at overall production, like OPS? What do you want to see there?
Well, there's a couple of things. The last thing I want to do with Laz is bucket him into a platoon power hitter. So I would want to see that he's handling his own against left-handed pitching. I would want him to bat every single day against left-handed pitching and give him as much exposure to that as he possibly can. And then the other thing, I mean, if we're looking more surface level, even though this isn't like the biggest indicator, it would probably be rolling strikeout rate. The EVs are always going to be there. The extra base hits are always going to be there. I think if people are, waiting to see Laz Montes improve in right field, I think it's a total waste of time. Let's just see him putting the ball in play with his massive raw power and holding his own against lefties. I'm not saying he needs to be a 290 hitter against lefties, but if he can hit 240 against lefties and still slug a little bit, my excitement level for that player is going to go up.
Let me give you three names: Logan Evans, Brandon Garcia, Michael Morales. Of the three, who do you think makes the biggest impact on the big league roster in 2025? And from where you stand right now, which of those three has the highest ceiling?
Wow, that's a really good question, and it makes you think about a number of things. I think Brandon Garcia is a reliever in a comfortable setting. I think Seattle would prefer that he be a 5-out type of a guy where he pitches 1 2/3 or 2 innings. So that kind of caps his ceiling from an impact perspective. But we've seen there are relievers that are just so dominant that they have incredibly impactful roles on the team. He would probably be number 3 for me, even though I'm most intrigued by what he can do. He could also be, I think, maybe the first name up from this group. I would probably put, it's a toss-up for me between Morales and Logan Evans. They're so similar. I would probably say this might be a hot take. I think Michael Morales might have a slightly higher ceiling than Logan Evans. And the reason I say that is Morales is a little bit younger. I understand he doesn't throw as hard, but he found a way to strike batters out this year. And that's always been my thing with Logan Evans is everyone's so juiced on him. But I'm like, point to a single pitch that Logan Evans has that misses bats. He doesn't have an out pitch, right? He doesn't have an out weapon. Now, he has a ton of soft contact weapons, and there's a ton of value in that in Major League Baseball. But ultimately, it kind of limits him to a number 5 starter at the big league level. I don't think his ceiling is much higher than that. I think he's a low 4, maybe a solid 4 if he unlocks another 1.5 miles on the fastball. And he has, the thing that's been interesting about Morales is he has seen pretty gradual linear development, which is exciting in a way. But I think I would be most excited about, so to answer your question, I think Brandon Garcia could impact the team the most in 2025, but I think the highest ceiling is Michael Morales.
How do those 3 then compare to the 2 pitchers the Mariners drafted at the top of the 2024 draft when we had you on post-draft, post-Dallas in the summer? You were pretty high on Durangelo Sanger and Ryan Sloan and what they could do this upcoming season. How does that whole picture shake out with the 5 of them by the end of this year?
Man, that's going to be really fun. That's going to be really fun to watch. I don't think there's any question that Ryan Sloan and Durangelo Sanger have the higher ceiling than any of the 3 that we just mentioned. I think people are very interested to see how Durangelo Sanger's stuff is going to translate to the next level. I mean, there are some things that he does. You know, he's up to 98 miles an hour from a lower slot, and he's super athletic, and he can spin a breaking ball. I don't know if he's got the full accoutrement of pitches to be, you know, in this Bryce Miller, Brian Wu conversation, but I think he could be a pretty good low 2 or a high 3. You know, maybe the 2024 version of Luis Castillo, to be honest. There's some similarities there. And then with Ryan Sloan, what a complete unknown. I mean, he is a 6'5", 230-pound high schooler. Like, high schooler. He is the size of Logan Gilbert, and he's 19 years old. I don't know if there's really anybody that knows what to expect from Ryan Sloan this year. There are things that he can do that have me excited. Again, up to 98, big body, workhorse frame, changeup, cutter, slider. I comped him to Lance Lynn during the draft. I have no idea what to expect from Ryan Sloan because nobody has seen him, at least in like a big setting on TrackMan, and nobody really knows what to expect from his stuff. So maybe Ryan Sloan might be the most interesting player we look forward to seeing this year. I'll be interested to see if he breaks camp with the team. They might keep him at the complex league to get him a little bit stronger like they did Walter Ford there for a while. And, you know, maybe he starts affiliated ball in June.
Colt Emerson. I'm going to preface this question by saying it is probably unlikely, but I want to get your 2 cents on it anyway. In what scenario could we see him up in the big leagues at the tail end of 2025?
Oh, man. Well, let's assume Seattle doesn't sign a third baseman this winter. Yeah. That would be troubling.
Not the hottest take we've heard.
Not the hottest take indeed. Frustrating. Man, that would be such. It wouldn't absolutely stun me. I think the more concerning thing would be where is Seattle at from a record standpoint that they feel the need to call Colt Emerson up in September. And now it's possible that they just don't have any better options on the infield, and you know they're fighting for a playoff spot, and that's probably likely. But Seattle's generally been pretty slow with its prospect, pretty conservative. I mean, Julio is prodigal in the way that he came about, and Jared Kelenic to a certain extent was also kind of a prodigal prospect in nature. I don't think that is Colt Emerson, and Colt Emerson still has a lot to gain and a lot to learn in minor league baseball. He's got to learn how to hit for power and backspin the baseball. He's got to get better at shortstop. So he's not as complete a product as the 2 guys that I mentioned before him. I would expect we see him at the end of 2026. But man, if we see him in 2025, one of 2 things has happened. The Mariners are in bad shape, or Colt Emerson is a star.
So that's what I was kind of getting at. We kind of we took opposite routes on this. You're thinking in the sense of the Mariners are playing terribly and they don't have anybody left to fill third base come September. I was almost thinking of it as, what if the team's playing really well? I know Colt didn't have a great end of the year once he got to Everett, but if he has a monster 2025 throughout the minors and part of that being in Double-A, is there any world that for one final shot in the arm as the team's trying to make a playoff run, they call him up to play some type of role in September? That's where my mind was going in a perfect world.
Yeah, I don't think they would call up Colt Emerson this year unless, I mean, he's going to be 19 this year, isn't he? He's going to be, he's going to be 20 all season. He's going to be 20 all season.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way that they would call him up unless he is hitting 340 at Arkansas with, and this is maybe the bigger part, he would have to be showing bigger exit velos. They're going to want to see the contact quality improve with Colt. For as much love as he gets for the hit tool, and it is a really, really good hit tool, Colt hasn't proven that he's going to hit for power. He's still looking like a guy that could be a 15 to 18 to 20 homer a guy at the next level. And so how much impact can he really provide if it's just the hit tool at the next level? I don't know. I would be very surprised. But if he is up in September, it would tell me that he's hitting the absolute hell out of the baseball.
How about one of Colt's prospect infield mates down there in the minor leagues in Cole Young, who I'm pretty sure we all expect is going to have some sort of role on this Mariners roster this year, whether or not he is ready. What would you expect for Cole Young at the big league level this year?
I'm excited for Cole Young. I might be more excited in the immediacy for Cole Young than I am for Colt Emerson. And there's something about Cole. I got to know him when he was a junior in high school, and the way he carries himself it's the type of energy, and Colt Emerson is the exact same way, for the record. It's the type of energy that just kind of exudes itself in the entire dugout and in the entire clubhouse. He's Mitch Haniger energy in like a 22-year-old kid. And I think his game is also going to translate to the big leagues pretty well. He strikes me as a guy who's going to take a lot of walks. He strikes me as a guy who is going to hit the mistake pitch out of the park in T-Mobile Park, which I think is exciting, and he's got the swing to hit it over that right field fence. I've comped Cole Young to Jeff McNeil for a very long time, and I think if you can get a 2 to 2.5 win second baseman year in and year out on this roster, hitting in the 7, 8, or 9 hole, you're pretty happy about that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do for Seattle, and I would expect to see him in June.
2 to 2.5 win players, damn near one of the best offensive players on the team at this rate. So yeah,
you're not wrong.
Take it.
And maybe the best second baseman in Cano.
Yeah, one of the best second basemen they've ever had.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many second basemen the Mariners have that accrue 10 WAR with the team.
I mean,
Boone,
Robbie, Brett Boone,
and Reynolds.
Yeah.
I bet there's not. I bet Jose Lopez was like 6.
I'll look this up while TJ asks another question, or while we stall time here. I'm curious.
Let me ask you about someone else then, because we've watched, I would say at least in some prospect lists and some discourse online, another Mariners prospect going in a different direction. It seems like Harry Ford's losing a little bit of helium. Why is that?
The thing with Harry has always been plate discipline. It's always been his biggest strength. He's going to take his walks, and he's got sneaky power. And the fear with Harry coming up the ladder has always been when you reach a level where they are throwing more strikes and they are hitting the corners, that passive approach doesn't work. And it's why I tell people all the time when they're evaluating prospects at low A and in the DSL and the complex league, don't pay attention to walks, because walks for a hitter should be the baseline. If you aren't walking at the lower levels and you're striking out a ton, aka Las Montes in DSL, that's when I'm concerned. So I think with Harry, it's, he's a 5'10" right-handed hitter. He's striking out more than he ever has. He's not hitting the ball as hard as he ever has. Now, Dickie Stevens is going to kill a guy. Like, Dickie Stevens Park is just brutal. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he has taken to catching at the rate that I think the team was hoping. It's not to say he's a bad catcher, but he doesn't look anymore like a full-time catcher at the big league level. And so I think you're putting a lot of emphasis and a lot of value on his ability to run, considering all of his other tools, and that's almost lost a little bit behind the plate. And you guys watched the left field thing was rough. So,
worst case scenario rough.
I don't even think he looks like a left fielder personally. Like I don't, and maybe you can give him 50 games out there and he looks more comfortable. But tracking the ball, he did not look like he was a natural type to track the baseball, and that worries me a little bit. Jose Marmoleos was good at tracking the baseball. Harry Ford looks pretty uncomfortable out there. Now he hasn't had the reps. It could get better, and it probably will get better. But I don't see him being better than a below average defensive left fielder at the next level. For me, and this is just if you guys want to reference, he's not a top 100 prospect for me.
And that seems to be the route that a lot of people seem to be going with him. So it makes sense. On a more positive note, I think the last one I've got for you is the Mariners have their most exciting draft pick.
Wow, did we get an answer?
Yeah.
Second base.
Do we have more than 3-10 WAR?
I almost forgot. Jose Lopez was at exactly 10.0 baseball reference WAR.
That's
right on the dot.
Oh no. We got to do fan graphs. We got to put defense in here. We got to put defense in here, because then you're going to call and you're going to tell me Yuniesky Betancourt was an 8-win shortstop, and I'm going to be like, no, he wasn't.
And we're talking about 10 wins just as Mariners, not for career.
Just as Mariners.
Oh, okay, yeah. Fangraphs is a little different than baseball reference for Jose Lopez.
Yeah. If we're talking about shortstops, let's talk about the value. Middle infielders, let's talk about value.
Jose Lopez's career WAR on Fangraphs was 4.8, so it's a little
His
different.
career WAR?
A little different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, he probably lost some toward the tail end, but yeah.
I bet, now that I'm thinking about it, Brett Boone was only here for 3.5, maybe 2.5 years. He was not here a very long time.
But it's still enough.
I still don't know with his glove if he was a 10 WAR second baseman. I know Robbie was like 14, 15, 16. And then I would guess Harold Reynolds is also pretty cleanly over that.
I'm going to guess Boone was, just because he had a couple of monster years while he was
39 homers.
In 2001, he was an 8-win player, and then the year after he was a 4-win player. So
I was going to say that 01 year he was pretty nuts.
Oh, sorry, and then 03 he was a 7.5-win player. So yeah,
wow. So he was like a 17-win second baseman.
He was almost a 20-win player in 3 seasons.
Wow, I did not give his glove enough credit. That's amazing.
Now I'll say those were the 3 best seasons of his career by far, because he didn't exceed 2.2 or barely even 2 the rest of his career in any single season. So crazy.
And then the Mitchell report came out.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, for anybody to hit 39 homers, I think that was his peak, was 39. Supplements or not, it's hard to hit a baseball, and Brett Boone was sensational for those 3 seasons.
No doubt.
In Seattle, too.
In Seattle.
I think the Mariners have their most exciting upcoming draft pick that they've had in a decade, and that's probably putting it lightly, upcoming here this summer. They have the number 3 pick. Thank you, MLB Draft Lottery, is all I can say. So with that, as we sit here in the middle of January, what are a couple names you're circling as of right now for who the Mariners may be targeting?
I mean, it's really hard not to look at college pitching. I think you look at the way this farm system is set up, and you look at the control years of some of the pitchers that they currently have in the big league roster. I think you're going to have a really good shot in this class to take an impact starting college pitcher, whether that be Tyler Bremner, whether that be Kyson Witherspoon, whether that be Jamie Arnold. There's going to be some college pitching that's available at 3 that I think is going to be it's going to have to be a heavy focus. On the bat side, this is where I struggle a little bit. I've said this on Overslot quite a few times. I don't think there is a franchise pillar to be had, at least right now, in this draft. On the college side, I don't see Jace Laviolette as being some sensational player. I think he's going to strike out a lot. I think he's going to struggle with lefties. He is going to hit a lot of home runs, but I don't know exactly where that profile is going to go. College bats that I would look for, I would keep an eye on someone like Iva Arquette. I think 3 is rich for Iva Arquette just because he doesn't really profile to be a dynamic defender at shortstop. He might be third base. He might be Troy Tulowitzki. He might be Mike Morse. You don't take that margin for error at 3. I'm struggling a little bit like you guys in terms of circling a college bat that I would be ultra excited for. On the high school side, I know fans don't want Seattle to go after a high school player, given their competitive window and where their farm is at. That might be the most impactful player that you can get at 3, whether that's Billy Carlson, the high school shortstop at Corona. I think Xavier Nyans in Mount Vernon is someone to keep close tabs on, especially because Xavier Nyans at 3 might be a little bit rich, and he's the hometown kid. He might afford you a decent little underslot deal where you can go even bigger at pick 35. I'm personally not on the Ethan Holiday bandwagon at 3, but there should be, let's put it this way, from January 19th until July 17th or whenever the draft is, there's probably going to be a couple of names that surface near the top of the draft that we're not talking about today that we're going to be a lot more excited about than we are right now.
So maybe I'm reading too much into how you listed a couple of these guys off, but when you were listing the college pitchers, you had Jamie Arnold III. In your mind, is he not the clear-cut starting pitcher 1? Because I know in a lot of people's minds right now he is. I've also seen some of those videos at Driveline where it looks like the numbers he's spitting out are off the charts. So
they are, yeah.
So maybe you are higher on him than I'm.
Yeah, I will just say this with Arnold, he's a crossfire lefty, and this isn't to speak fear into anything. So don't cut it like that. Danny Holtzen was a crossfire lefty. Jamie Arnold has way better stuff than what Danny Holtzen had. I just think there are certain organizations, and I'm not saying this is what Seattle is like, because Seattle has gone after some pretty outlier arms over the last few years later in drafts. There are risk aversion organizations at the top of a draft who would just prefer not to take the unorthodox lefty who throws across his body and is 6'1" and is touching 98. Like sometimes the math just doesn't add up. So if you want to go more cookie cutter and like, hey, this is what they look like, Tyler Bremner, Kyson Witherspoon probably are a little bit more of like, hey, this is what's shown in a magazine. Whereas Jamie Arnold is like, the freak. Like you want to reach for Chris Sale, you want to try and get something real spicy, then you take someone like Arnold.
Has the draft lottery worked?
For what it was intended to do, no. I don't think so. I mean, like, the White Sox are one of the worst teams of all time last year. And I don't think you could find a person in Chicago who would say the White Sox were purposely trying to be bad. Like, they took their shots. They paid for players. They went in on free agents. They made trades. And it went so poorly that they had to deconstruct that roster. They weren't tanking for a bad pick. And I think the same can be said about the Rockies. I think the same can be said to a certain degree about the Royals. The Athletics live in a bucket of their own, and some other organizations like, the Pirates, they don't spend like they should. They live on an island of their own, but the draft lottery was put into place so teams couldn't pick at the top of the draft more than once or twice in a row. I don't know about you guys, but I don't feel like the league is tanking any more than it did. And I actually think it's been more punitive to teams like the Royals and the Athletics and the White Sox and the Nationals who, against, forces against their control, just ended up being worse than they probably should have been.
It almost just seems much more random than some of the other lotteries I've seen. We can use the Guardians example from a season ago. Like, they were in the playoffs and they got Travis Bazzana, who could very well be on their big league roster this year because he's that good. And then the Mariners were a game out of the playoffs and they're going to pick third. That does, in a technical sense, sound unfair to some of the worst teams, but it's almost like just turning it into a crapshoot.
Yeah, the issue, I think, with this lottery, and I don't have the percentages in front of me for the NBA, but the issue with the Major League Baseball lottery is if you have the worst record in baseball, you have a 16.5% chance of getting the number one pick. Like, that's not great odds. And that equates to the 3 worst teams having a 50% chance of landing the number one pick. So it's essentially a coin flip that one of the 3 teams that isn't the worst in baseball will land the number one pick, which I think is crazy. And that applies through the top 6 picks. So I think every year you're going to see a team or 2 that just has no business being there jump up into the top 6. It's worked out well for the AL West. I mean, the Rangers have Wyatt Langford, and hopefully Seattle can land a player of his caliber at the number 3 pick.
Mm-hmm. Joe, this has been fun as always. You're the best. We love talking to you, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, you guys are the best too. Thanks for having me on, and I always enjoy hopping on Marine Layer, so appreciate you guys.
Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Joe Doyle. Again, if you want to check out all of his work, you can go listen to the Overslot podcast, and you can go find all of his written work over at Future Stars. Joe was great. Hope you guys learned a lot about Jorge Batista and some of the other guys in the international class and some Mariners prospects as well. But my takeaway from that, I cannot wait to watch and see what the Beast does moving forward, because he's a real prospect. All right, that just about wraps up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to the full form podcast, you can do so wherever you get your audio pods. Make sure to download, make sure to rate and review, leave a 5-star review. It really does help us out if you guys do that. Go like, comment, and hit subscribe on YouTube. And if you're on social media, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts, at Marine Layer Pod. One more reminder, less than a month from now, our first ever live show, Thursday, February 20th, 6 p.m. at Moss Bay Hall in Kirkland. We cannot wait. We hope to see you guys there. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.